Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and for the panel 4, Battery Supply Chain, Raw Material and Sustainability. Today's Battery Day 2023. Yeah, very brief. I introduce our moderator for the panel 4 is Neil Tamane, Strategic Advisor at London Business School. Thank you, Neil, for joining. And yeah, I'll be there backstage for you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So glad to have this conversation. I think just building off the last panel, which was also on battery passports, we're going a little deeper with this conversation, talking about supply chains, raw materials, and sustainability. And first up, I'd like to invite Suzanne to join us. She's the Chief Innovations and Solutions Officer at Sperity, and she can give us a little more context to what she's been doing.
Yes, thank you, Neil, for the short introduction. So, yeah, my name is Susanne Gut-Orlowski. I work for Cerity here as Chief Innovation and Solutions Officer for actually building product passport technology. That's what we do. We've heard a lot about the battery passport, but it also needs to be built. So that's what we're here for. We aim at standardizing a lot of things because we believe strongly that only with interoperability capabilities we can actually make this battery passport a success. So that's what we are engaged in, and therefore also engaged in the standards group from the European Commission about the standards mandate and other activities around it. And I'm trying to put in also our deep technical knowledge about especially the decentralized setup and decentralized technologies, which is what the European Commission is asking for in the implementation of the product passport.
Thanks a lot, Suzanne. I'd also love to invite Christian on the stage. He's the account director. He also spoke at the keynote earlier today and is part of the Optel group. Christian, could you also just give us a little more context to what you're up to so that the ones that haven't heard from you also catch up?
Yeah, thanks very much. Hi, everyone. So I'm Christian Jones. I'm an account director focusing on battery, mine and mineral at Optel Group. So for those of you that don't know Optel, so Optel is a supply chain traceability, CO2 tracking, ESG due diligence reporting, and analytics solution provider. And what we do is we help organizations achieve their responsible sourcing and ESG objectives. And then we also facilitate compliance with evolving global regulations. So currently I work with recyclers, OEMs, battery manufacturers, and other participants within the battery value chain. And that's really, across most regions across the world now. My role is to work with the different organizations and educate them and really to understand the requirements and work with our internal teams to implement solutions to support, our customers to achieve their goals. So most of my career really has been spent in technology. So I've worked in sort of support to operations, project management, relationship management, and into sales. And really over the past 7 years, I've worked in supply chain transparency, particularly focused in areas of risk management, ESG and traceability. And those are covered industries such as aerospace and defence, food and beverage, and of course, automotive, batteries and battery materials.
Thanks a lot, Christian. We look forward to hearing more about the complexity with data and supply chain as well from you a little later. But I'd also love to invite Jessica, who is a founder in residence at Antler and was also part of the Battery Alliance's network more recently.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica. I'm currently an independent consultant helping to accelerate climate tech and sustainable development in the Asia-Pacific region. I'm currently based in my home country of Indonesia. And previous to this, I was based in Hong Kong and Singapore, working on sustainable financing and green banking products, as well as integrating ESG factors into investment and business processes, along with sourcing decarbonization solutions. And one of my current focus areas is helping to support building more resilient, sustainable, and circular battery supply chains, particularly in Indonesia. And it's a newer area for me, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to do the Battery MBA program, and looking forward to apply also my previous experiences in the sustainability space into this newer area for me in batteries. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jessica. And last but not the least, Eggerts, the innovation manager at B Planet Factory, is going to share a little more context from the industry perspective. So welcome, Eggerts.
Okay, thanks, Nid, and hi everyone for this. So basically, I am Eggerts Martinez Lacerna, PhD on Second Life Batteries and Innovation Manager here at B Planet Factory. I've been working on batteries for around 10 years now, covering many technical aspects from the cell level to the battery pack design, electronics, BMS, etc. And while I'm here today representing B Planet Factory, it's a pleasure for us to be here. So just a few words on B Planet. We were founded 5 years ago with the purpose of building Second Life battery-based BESS systems, battery energy storage systems. And well, since then, we've been building batteries for many different stationary applications like CNI, fast EV charging support, hybridization with PV plants, etc. So, well, we are a young company, but growing pretty fast. We currently have around 10 megawatt hours already installed in field. And well, I'm glad to be here today, and I hope to bring the Second Life battery manufacturer's perspective to this panel today.
Yeah, so as you can see, we're looking to have a conversation around from the entire spectrum, all the way from the source in terms of the supply chain, from where all the materials are being gathered and the documentation of that. We've been talking about battery passports already, but I'm also very looking forward to hearing more perspectives on how different players in this sector are also reutilizing some of the existing materials and what kind of data they're working with. But talking about data, Christian, maybe I'll like to go to you first. In the context of supply chains, establishing trust and traceability is paramount. And you've already mentioned that there are a few challenges associated with collecting data. Maybe you could shed some light on how you've been navigating the same and what are the opportunities that you see going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I mean, I think there's a number of different elements to this kind of answer, really. So, I mean, first of all, Optel's goal is always to collect primary data. We are able to kind of call on different databases in order to pull data across, but primarily we are focused on that obtaining data from suppliers. So I think we have to recognise that with suppliers, they are fundamentally different. They're different sizes, different scales. They have different processes, procedures, and systems in place, as well as different technologies. And the data quality is different. How they collect and store data is different. So it's important to recognise all of these things, and they don't always have the information in a kind of easy format. So it's down to organisations like us to help suppliers in the best way that we can. So we have an onboarding team, we have partners, and their role really is to help suppliers in order to pull this data together, to be able for us to consume that data. So of course, I touched previously on the broad range of different types of data capture mechanisms that we use, and these are kind of manual tool sets, the semi-automated tool sets, and fully automated tool sets, and it's given them that variety and the options available in order to to capture those different kind of data sets. I think another element of this is that suppliers do sometimes have concerns about sharing data with technology providers, such as ourselves. So, it's important for us to be able to, to sort of deal with those types of situations. So we hold, different sessions, education sessions. We work with suppliers. We're not capturing any kind of secret source data or any financial information. So it's about really bringing suppliers, along with us in order to try and, capture the data that's needed. Now, I think that kind of also extends to, different regions around the world and different countries. So, In some locations, there's political reasons for concerns about sharing data with other countries and with traceability providers such as ourselves. So we're now starting to work with different governments around the world, really again to help alleviate some of the concerns and to build trust, and to settle any concerns that they might have about the access for different people into that data and how that data is ultimately used. And those conversations really now are going very well. And in fact, in some areas, there's government officials really that are supporting us and encouraging suppliers to work with us in those countries. I think other elements around this are things like data being shared between different providers. So we've talked about the battery passport, we've talked about interoperability. It might be that, for instance, that an OEM might decide on using a particular passport. A battery manufacturer may be using a different traceability solution. Optel is also building their own kind of battery passport as well. So we're going to have to share data with other solution providers, and we're going to have to consume data that's provided by other solution providers. So, having that interoperability, having the standardization of data, is going to be quite important. I mean, for Optel, it's a little bit different because, we've been around for 30 years. We have, connectors into third-party solutions, over 3,000 of these, and we use data standards such as GS1, which is globally recognized. And of course, I think Hege touched on it earlier about the GBA, and there's a number of kind of working groups that are looking at different data sets and how this is all going to kind of fit together. So we would expect really that the results of this will be shared with the European Commission, and there'll be greater guidance on, again, how this works going forward in terms of the secondary part of the legislation. And then I think maybe just as a final point, so we're always looking at ways to improve data collection, expand the range of tool sets that we can offer to suppliers. So our innovations and exploration teams are looking at technologies such as AI as how to improve efficiencies and reduce resource requirements and avoid repetition and duplication of effort. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how some of these things evolve, and I think we'll the way that we capture data will be very different in the future.
For sure. And I think you've already touched on some of the interesting pointers that I think I was also looking to steer towards Suzanne. She's been working on a lot of these amazing techniques as well. You've been working a lot of other innovative raw material fingerprinting techniques as well to support the supply chain transparency. So maybe you could also give us some context to what are the different kind of techniques that you're working with, the technologies, and also talk to some of the interoperability related conversations that Christian's already begun.
Yes, I do that, and if someone pulling up my slides to here we go. Okay, wonderful. So I mean, we're as Verity, we're kind of the technology specialists in decentralized identity technology, and use all these kinds of different standards on different layers to implement product passports in general. Of course, the battery passport is the first that's coming, so we use it in all our examples, and we are also kind of well connected in kind of the battery domain with the GBA. We are a GBA member. We're supporting partner of Battery Pass. I'm thankful that we got an introduction to that already. We work with Catena X and Gaia X, which is kind of the basis on which we want to build the product passport as a decentralized technology. Gaia X also a European, funded project to build data spaces to easily exchange verifiable data. And all that's used there, all technology that's used is open standards, open source, permissionless, kind of free of charge things, because I personally believe that's the key to success if we want to exchange data in the value chain. And so if you want to pull out your phone and scan in the QR code, what you will get to is actually probably the world's first digital product passport, which is verifiable, which contains all the attributes that we saw from the battery pass introduction in the earlier session. So we are trying to take all that that data and standards and exchange protocols to actually build the product passport in a way that different supply chain actors are able to exchange data as well, so that you don't have just, I mean, one tool. Usually the tools kind of are specified for one part of the value chain, you know, upstream, downstream, or in between, but it's super important that everyone can easily provide the data in a standardized format, and that they can be exchanged and that they can be verifiable. So that's where we're into. And the project that I wanted, actually want to come to my main point, which is the next slide, is the Muddy Trace project, which is an EU-funded project where we exactly look at the value chain and look at the different data that is kind of created at the different supply chain actors during the value chain. And one important kind of area that we're looking on in this project is that we want to make raw material traceable. At the very left, you find kind of the cobalt, graphite, lithium, nickel mine kind of supply chain actors, the mining sites, where you have the possibility to use ionization fingerprints to uniquely identify the material and where it comes from. So there are a lot of geologists that work on that. We don't work on that. We work on the technology to provide that data in a digital format and verifiable format downstream to the other actors in the value chain. But that's kind of one focus of the project, to fingerprint material, so that later on you can actually be sure of that this this material is actually coming from a certain mine. And then in parallel, you can maybe find out that mine, what certifications does that mine have. Yeah. In the project, we're working with the SARA certifications, that they're partners. It's coming from DMT, but of course we're preparing it in a way so that you can also digitize other certifications that are not part of this project. But after the project has finished, or meanwhile, I mean, you're invited to participate, so that for the raw material side, you can actually also issue towards sustainable mining certification or IRMA certification, or, you know, you maybe have an RCS audit for a mine, or, for example, we work with the British Columbia government. They provide mining permits, which also gives you already a rudimentary proof that the mine works in a sustainable way. So the idea is that we use the same technological basis to have information issued to the mine site certifications, but also throughout the different steps in the value chain, so that at the end, on the right side here, market authorities, recyclers, and in other users can actually use this information to make their decisions on, can I recycle this still, or is this coming really from a sustainable mine, and so forth. So that's kind of the idea of the project, and we're sharing regularly results from the project. And one of the most important aspects is really to work on the interoperability, so that the standard, the data exchange mechanisms and technologies are based on a joint standard, and therefore is interoperable. The GBA was mentioned a couple of times. In the track and trace group, we will also now starting again on picking out areas that we want to standardize. And so I'm inviting everyone to coming to the GBA and to the track and trace group to look at a standardization of information bits and pieces. We were maybe looking at greenhouse gas emissions as the first step. And out of this should fall best practices standard, probably to exchange that data between different supply chain actors and so forth. And I also see the GBA in the role of, driving the governance around these topics as well. So that's kind of the little thing I wanted to introduce. I'm looking forward to questions and the discussion. Thank you, Neil. I'm giving back to you.
Thanks a lot. I think it's great to hear all of these innovations and perspectives on how global transparency is being is being created, and I think the institutions and the regulators will have to play a major role in that. But I think moving on from the perspective of how a lot of this data is sourced, I'd also love to shift the ball towards the perspective of the downstream industrial manufacturing. And Ego, it's here. You've been working with Second Life batteries, and you can shed some light on how the materials that are delivered to you are delivered to you by OEMs. And I think you might have a slightly different side of the picture that you'd like to shed some light on, and also indicate some ideas in terms of challenges that you're facing, and what are the opportunities that you see in new solutions that could be explored along those lines.
Yeah, definitely, Neil. Thanks for giving me the ball. We've heard a little bit on all the challenges we face. That's definitely true. It's not easy to deal with all this traceability, having access to this data. We've seen that it's technologically challenging, and even having the data itself is sometimes hard. I mean, in our particular case of Second Life battery manufacturers, it's even harder because to cope with our demand, we currently have to face different batteries coming from different OEMs. So we have to source different resources, different references, and that makes it even harder. We know that each OEM has its own references, its own cells. Even for the same vehicle, we can have many different cells. So tracing all this data backwards and the whole complete value chain upstream is hard. Currently, the amount of data we can normally get, because we don't source cells, we don't source materials, we source battery packs or modules. So the data we can have from OEMs at this very moment is rather scarce, and we have to face many different activities with a lot of opacity in terms of LCA studies, predicting how our batteries will perform, how will age, actually at which state of health level they currently are when we receive them. It's hard to know beforehand, so we need to build our own systems, our own methods to be aware of how the things are when we receive them. And I'm not planning to blame anyone for that. It's not. We have to understand the OEM's perspective. Until now, this data is hard to be retrieved, even when it's not systematically stored and traced. And that's the scenario we have to face, because to the end, at the end of the day, it's also the similar scenario that the OEMs themselves are facing. We hope that this new regulation context, how things are changing, not only in Europe, but also worldwide in terms of regulation, traceability, these battery passports that we've heard of. We truly believe that this will transform our business and will make things easier in many different ways. And it's transforming the Second Life battery business in two main angles. First, we will be data consumers. We truly believe that all this data that will be at some point in the passport will help us take better informed decisions, analyze a little bit better where batteries are coming from, how they have been used, manufactured, transported, etc. So all this data will help us do better LCA studies, calculating our carbon footprint, ultimately even improving our own products so that we can reduce their environmental footprint, etc. And also analyze a little bit better and without so much testing, I would say, how batteries can be eligible or not for a particular Second Life use. And if not, the data will also help and contribute to the recycling process itself. So having that data, consuming that data will certainly have a huge impact on the things we typically do on our daily basis. But on the other side, we will also be data producers. We understand that as battery repurposers, we will need to tackle our own processes, probably analyze, review, and perhaps modify some of our internal processes when we try to build new batteries. And it's something that we will need to address rather quickly. And in the same time, At the same time, the data we generate as second life battery operators will probably also need to be stored in the passport. So everything will change from the sourcing of the cells or the modules to the ultimate deployment and usage of the second life battery. So it's something that we are currently exploring. We just kicked off a project in which we are planning to build our own first proof of concept of this kind of battery passports. So we are already trying to gather and construct and structure all this data downstream that we will be generating, and hopefully this data coming from the OEMs and the whole value chain upstream will definitely help us a lot in building our products. And ultimately, we believe, just as a closing remark, I think that having this kind of data will help everyone in the end taking better informed decisions. It will boost sustainability, and as long as we are educating ourselves as industry and also the end users to pay attention to the sustainability of the products we build and the products we consume, having this kind of data, relying on primary data instead of databases, secondary data, etc., will certainly have an impact. And as reusers of batteries, it will probably put us in a very favorable position, in the sense that we are currently using resources that have already been imported or that have already been manufactured, and probably will have a reduced environmental footprint compared to producing a new battery. So we are looking forward to how everything unfolds in terms of these new regulations, and well, definitely open to any questions that the audience may have, and looking forward to the discussion with my colleagues here in this panel. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Egert. I think a lot of the conversation has been focused around data and very European-led in terms of our perspectives on it. I'm looking forward to hearing from Jessica as well. Jessica, you've been looking at increasing Indonesia's battery recycling rates, and you've also been looking at how Indonesia can emerge as the battery hub in the ASEAN region. So maybe you can share some thoughts on where are the opportunities in Indonesia, and how the perspectives are different, if any. And yeah, we'd love to hear more from you in terms of what's brewing in your part of the world.
Sure, yes, thank you. Great, yes. So batteries are a newer industry in ASEAN and in India. The momentum has really just been growing for the past 5 years. So since then, there's been a lot of discussions and also strategic plans being developed in ASEAN as well as in India. So to share, ASEAN recently just agreed a EV pact to build a regional ecosystem for EVs production. And then in Thailand, they also have released their plan for 30 at 30 policy, which is to really spur the EV production as well. And for Vietnam, it's really driven by certain enterprises or brands of EVs to develop nationally the EV production and use. And India as well has also set significant 2030 EV targets. And in addition to EVs, the ambition for Indonesia to be the largest battery hub in ASEAN is really twofold. It's both upstream and downstream. Upstream, it being that it has the world's largest nickel production and reserves, and downstream in that it really wants to spur a greater domestic use of EVs to as part of reaching its national carbon emissions reduction targets, as well as the transition to a more cleaner energy and transport use. So back to your question on, I wanted to share the ongoing developments in this supply chain. So for Indonesia, they've established its own state-owned enterprise called the Indonesia Battery Corporation, which aims to build an end-to-end domestic supply chain. And so the upstream part has been most developed. Nickel mining has been it's a very more saturated industry with certain key players in the space, state-owned enterprises, and where really the greater development in the supply chain has been in the midstream, because Indonesia's ambitions to be a battery hub is really starting from zero production capacity. So there's been significant investments in this space from overseas organizations and market partnerships. So only in just the past 3 years, there's been deals in the space and amounting to $15 billion to really build new battery plant facilities across Indonesia. And right now, in terms of the downstream, in terms of the adoption for EVs, it's still quite lagging in Indonesia as well as in ASEAN. Really, the largest market in ASEAN for EV use has been in Thailand, and that in itself is still a small percentage compared to more developed markets that have been discussed about in this panel. And so when it comes to recycling, it really is, Indonesia is aiming by 2027 to have that facilities fully operable in Indonesia. It expects that there will be millions of, at least 2.4 million EV batteries to be recycled by 2030. So, but at the same time, there's it's still very much in the early stages. So in terms of the feedstock supply, because of the lagging EV adoption, there really isn't as much feedstock supply for recycling to really be efficient and also really fulfill its sustainability targets. So the Indonesian government has also enabled used lithium-ion batteries to be imported to Indonesia to support the development of the recycling ecosystem here. And it can also look into developing other battery products and to feed into the recycling ecosystem as well. And as part of that, all new battery plants in Indonesia that are in developments or in plants will have recycling facilities. That's been very much encouraged by the government, and it's still and the first recycling plant will enter Indonesia in next year. And in terms of supply chain traceability, there are supply chain traceability enterprises that are supporting the traceability from end to end, but really there is still a lot. It can really be spurred even further in Indonesia and in ASEAN, really in the midstream, from the developments of the electric vehicles as well as other battery component and products, and that's really still in the initial stages. And I'd really love to see the solutions being shared here today by the other panelists to really be more involved here in Indonesia and ASEAN as well. And in terms of the strategic partnerships and policies, so I mentioned that ASEAN recently established a pact for EVs, and Indonesia is also working with Australia and other markets. And right now it's looking into developing a critical minerals agreement with the US as well. So really having more strategic partnerships and policies in the space can really help to bridge more sustainability in the end-to-end battery supply chain. And in addition to that, recently Indonesia has started looking into battery standardization and with flexibility for certain EV designs. And it's still in the initial stages, and it's really encouraging to see because that will really help to support the recycling developments as well, given that with standardization, more universal dimension and form for batteries across all the EVs. And but really Indonesia can look to India or South Korea as examples where best practices where they have developed battery standardization there. So those were the ongoing developments so far. It's still a newer space, and there's a lot of lessons, best practices still needs to be integrated as part of the building the ecosystem as well as a more sustainable battery supply chain in Indonesia as well as ASEAN.
Thanks a lot, Jessica. There's a lot of interesting developments, and I think the world needs to come together as well in terms of sharing data and insights and processes in terms of how we're managing a lot of this. Suzanne, maybe you have a couple of thoughts you wanted to quickly reflect on this before we go to Mariano, who has a poll for all of us to discuss on.
Sorry, to reflect on what exactly?
On some of the data-related conversations that Jessica already brought upon in terms of how we're doing this. But maybe let's get to this in the Q&A, because we have a few questions from the audience as well that we could focus on. at length on that. But Mariano, maybe you could step in and share your poll that we'd like to get some thoughts on.
Great, Neil, thank you. Then the question for the audience was, which sustainability-related trends innovation will have the most significant impact on raw material sourcing in the next decade? As you see here, the most was advanced recycling technology, the second industry-wide collaboration, then the third and the fourth was demand for supply sustainability and increased government regulation. Over to you, Neil.
Yeah, so on this poll, again, Suzanne, Christian, Jessica, Egoitz, I don't know if either one of you want to chip in with a few thoughts on how you see some of this evolving in terms of the question as well, and if you have any specific thoughts you want to add to it.
Sure. So I'm starting now, okay? Okay, so I think that from my view, what I see is definitely the increased government regulations, unfortunately. So I give you an example. We have a deadline for the battery regulation, which is now 2027, the beginning of 2027. We do not have deadlines for all the other product segments under the ESPR, so product passport for textiles and so forth. And the only area where there's really speeding up the development and, the industry comes together and finding solutions and standardizations are being driven is because there's a deadline for the regulation. So I would definitely say increased governmental regulations.
For sure. And I noticed that the advanced recycling technologies seem to stand out as well. And so, Egoitz, I don't know if you have any thoughts to reflect on that as well, since you're working with that.
Yeah, so well, I can agree with Susan. I think that regulations are pushing really hard many different boundaries right now, and I do see it as one of the main drivers right now for a lot of innovation related to raw materials and traceability. That's pretty clear. I totally agree as well with. Well, I think that recycling technologies, it's somehow coupled to the regulation as well, right? So if we go to the new batteries regulation, it's clear that we will need new advanced recycling technologies so that we can get into the figures and the numbers that are written in there, right? So it will certainly have a huge impact. We are also building a recycling facility. That was something that we were not planning when the company was starting. So we are a good example of that, and definitely that will certainly have a huge impact on where we source our raw materials from, also in terms of sovereignty and availability of raw materials in Europe in particular. So that will probably change our landscape quite a lot. And definitely all this comes to an end into sustainability. If we can have our own recycling facilities, we will avoid a lot of transportation and different mining approaches, etc. So everything's coupled in a sense, and definitely we can get into this point without industry-wide collaboration. We've seen here people actually targeting to build their own product passports, etc. We will probably be the users of this technology. The data that we input in there will need to be processed and published by someone else. So I think the approach and the order that this poll suggests is quite right, but to me, regulation is the one that is pushing everything else to happen.
Yeah, I think maybe moving on from that, Christian, I think you also mentioned this previously. Looking at battery passports has been clear, but I think there's also an opportunity in cell passports and going to further level of granularity, which I think was brought up in the panel, the last panel as well. So I'm curious on hearing your quick thoughts as well before we move on to some of the Q&A questions from the audience.
Sorry, in what context, Neil? Sorry.
So you had mentioned that cell passports are also starting to gain some traction. This has not been regulated or mandated by any of the regulations as yet, but this could be a differentiator in how some of the organizations working in the space are stepping ahead.
Yeah, I mean the battery passport is going to be the first of what we think is going to be many digital product passports across many different industries. And it could well be that the battery passport acts as a blueprint for other forms of digital passport. So yeah, I mean, increasingly, we're being asked to look at passports for cells and passports for materials. And as I say, we work across different industries as well, and the topic is coming up all the time. So I think we're looking into a future where all of the traceability data that's being provided from other sources will be kind of paramount to the collection of data into passports and proving the green credentials, proving compliance, and we're sure it'll take other forms of information going forward. So what the battery passport looks like today and what other digital passports look like, that will evolve over time, and it will contain a huge amount of different sources of information.
Naturally. So maybe moving on, and I think connecting to battery passports, and I think looking at data manipulation. Vinay Kulkarni from the audience asks us, how can data manipulation be avoided while digitally tracking supply chain and carbon footprint numbers? And Suzanne, maybe you have a few thoughts to this that you like to shed some light on.
Yeah, unfortunately, I only had 5 minutes before. So otherwise, I would have probably gone deeper into the concept, which is, of course, that the data that comes from the different actors is actually signed by them, digitally signed. So that means, first of all, you can then find out if the data has been manipulated digitally. So that's one point. But there's also a very valuable service to that, which is the company that has issued the data can be held liable for the statements that they make. Yeah. So they have to say the truth because they sign it with their signature, as you would sign a contract today with your hand signature. You sign it with a digital signature. So it can be, you can be held liable, and also it's not modifiable in any way. So this will help us in tracking this data along the supply chain.
Yeah.
Shall I just add into that, Neil, as well? So from our perspective, I mean, we have different controls and mechanisms really for kind of identifying where, the information provided, doesn't necessarily make a huge amount of sense, should we say. So there are things that we have in place, but then we also ask for evidence in respect of the data that's provided. And then, of course, our partnership with an independent third party that, can really go and interrogate this data and verify. So it's not just about the information that the suppliers provide, and it's not just about the capabilities that Optel have in respect of this, but it's also then having another party that's able to then go in and investigate and identify any issues that might be with the information that supplies. So it's a kind of multi-tier approach. And I mean, I don't think you can ever 100% guarantee that every last detail is 100% accurate. But I think, having this kind of layered approach at least minimizes the possibility of any, sort of fraud type behavior or misleading information.
Yeah, fully agree to the layered approach. Yeah.
If I just can add a few words in this regard, the hard part here comes on how to verify the data that we are publishing and how the calculation methods for some of the dynamic data that needs to be published in there, right? So standardization on some of the metrics we will probably need on battery passports will certainly be necessary. It's not the same how everyone calculates, for example, the state of health. So if we need to be verifiable and we need to be accurate, it will be a lot of work to be done in this regard in terms of how we trace the data, how we calculate the data we publish. Pretty much the same happens with carbon footprint, etc. So I think there's still some guidelines over there, but there's a lot of work still to be done in this kind of aspects. It's not that much concerned about data manipulation, that I think we can rely on guys like my colleagues today here for this kind of aspects, but there's still some things that need to be clarified because before this gets into play, let's say, or into force.
Yeah, and as we're getting to time, I think before we close this panel, I'd love to actually pose a question to each one of you. So if you're sitting with one question for the industry around supply chains, what is the one big key question that you'd like to answer or see the industry answering within the next couple of years? And maybe we could start with you, Christian, if that's all right.
In terms of sustainability.
In terms of supply chain and sustainability, yes.
I think I think there's a huge amount of work going on kind of right now across the industry. There's still a lot to be defined. There's different working groups really that are focusing and trying to tackle some of the complexity and some of the issues. And I'd hope really that some of the sort of direction becomes clearer over time. And I think at the moment with the first part of the legislation, there's still quite a lot of questions that people have got and that haven't been answered. Now I think in terms of the first part of the legislation, there's probably more in it that a lot of people were expecting. But also there are still unanswered questions. So I think if there is greater clarity on the legislation, there's more granular detail, it will really kind of help people understand more and really be able to start to plan to how they're going to kind of tackle some of these issues. So we'll wait and see how that kind of evolves.
That's fair.
But yeah, that would be my thoughts around it.
So I hear how is legislation going to address some of these challenges? Suzanne, maybe you have a few thoughts to add as well.
Yeah, so I think I would always ask for how do we achieve the highest degree of interoperability between different actors in the value chain. So that's kind of my main point, because once the data flows, we take a lot of hassle away also from all the supply chain actors. Yeah, I see them getting more and more regulations. And today the sitting people, they're typing in information from somewhere by hand. It's duplicated, it's not accurate, it is, I don't know, it's not verifiable and many times in all different value chains, not only batteries. So how do we achieve interoperability is my biggest question mark, and that's what I'm also working on and trying to give trying to dedicate my career to that at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure Igor's will be very happy with that. So Igor, what's the question you're sitting with?
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty aligned with Susan. I think interoperability is the right aspect in this regard. To me, the biggest concern right now is I think the requirements are pretty clear. The things that will probably go into these traceability solutions are pretty clear. But standardizing everything, being sure that everyone reports the same things in the same manner, it's ultimately what will enable that this data is actually valuable, because otherwise everything will become a huge mesh and that will be hard to manage. So that's for me the biggest concern, perhaps the biggest gap to be covered at this very moment.
Thanks a lot. And Jessica, do you want to add with a question as well?
Sure, yeah. And since it is more of a newer industry for the region that I'm in, I'd like to ask how can we adapt and implement battery standards and policies towards emerging markets, and because it is still in the initial stages and ongoing, and I think the region, Indonesia and ASEAN region, is really working towards meeting the sustainability standards of globally as well.
Thanks a lot. On that note, I think we're at time. Thanks a lot, everyone. I know this was not enough time we just barely opened the can of worms. There's a lot to talk about in terms of supply chain and sustainability and raw materials. But we love to keep the conversation going. We have a networking session. There's a lot of portals, even in terms of the LinkedIn channel that the Alliance has. So feel free to drop in questions and thoughts there. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thanks a
All the
lot.
best.
Thank you, the
Ciao.
panelists.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed the last two panels. We're now moving into the deep dive session of part 2. So the way the deep dives work is you will have the option to select 1 out of 3 deep dive sessions. So deep dive 1 is with twice, deep dive 2 is with circular, and deep dive 3 is with a cure. 3 of our sponsors for today. They'll be taking place in the sessions section of your home, your Hopin home. And the way the sessions will run, there'll be about 35 minutes of a bit of a show and tell from each of our sponsors on their preferred topic. And we strongly encourage a lot of interaction and asking questions in the comment section of the Hopin platform in the chat there. And each of the deep dive moderators will work with the presenter on getting as many of these questions answered as possible. So we really want you guys to get stuck in and engage with the content by asking as many questions as you can. So if you can move towards the home section of Hopin and into sessions, you can make your selection there. See you then.